Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is up? This is Lucas Rojas. As always, you're listening live to episode number 7 of Rivals React Radio. I'm not starting this show off with Evan Medina, who would regularly be here with me, but I hope to have him on soon. He should be jumping on this call very shortly. If not, we'll just plan accordingly and roll on with the show as we go live with myself. And basically, the discussion for today will be the year in review of sports for 2016. It's a new year. Happy New Year to everybody listening. In case you didn't know, we didn't have a show at all from last week, of course, because of vacation and the holidays, but we're recovering very nicely here. And to start off the fresh year, January 2017. It is January 3rd, 2017. But before we get into anything that's going on today, let's just review the year that was in 2016. And the year we had featured the Denver Broncos being the Super Bowl 50 champions, of course. They won the game 24-10 over the favored Carolina Panthers. This happened back in February of 2016 last year. So just to give a quick little rundown and review of everything that's gone on in the sport world of 2016. I'm going to start it off by talking about Super Bowl 50 and what I thought about that matchup, what I thought about the game, and the aftermath of that whole situation. Now that I look back on it, the Denver Broncos were an elite team that season, last season I should have said. And Peyton Manning, of course, had very minimal impact throughout the course of that season. In fact, he was benched because of injury, and then he had to come back in the final week of the season and ultimately led his team to the Super Bowl. And then, of course, they won the Super Bowl. But what the Broncos were known for throughout the entire season and even in the playoffs last season was their defense and how elite their defense was. So ultimately, it was their defense that carried them. And I think we're getting Evan on the call right now. Hey, Evan, what is up? I was just getting into the whole Broncos versus Panthers Super Bowl 50 matchup from last season. I did let the audience know you'd be able to jump on here at any second now, and just in time, man. What's up?
How are we doing, my friend?
I'm doing excellent, and of course,
have a good couple of
Happy
holidays?
New Year to you.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. How were your holidays?
My holidays, they were pretty good. Same as usual, spent it with the family, and that's about it.
You know what? Nothing better than that, right?
Yeah, nothing can beat that.
Absolutely. So what do we got here? Super Bowl from last year you're talking about?
Yeah, Super Bowl 50, the matchup that happened between the Broncos and the Carolina Panthers. Right before you jumped in, I was basically describing what the season was for the Broncos and how I felt that it was more of the defense that carried that team. But I was also going to get into Peyton Manning. But before I get into that now, I guess I'll leave the floor up to you and I guess analyze what you thought about that game and the whole season.
Yeah, that was an interesting season for the NFL, no question. And, I mean, the real 2016, I guess, recap is mainly the Super Bowl and the playoffs. No question, Denver being the Super Bowl champions was a little bit strange. I think everybody felt that way. It was a weird Super Bowl champion for sure, because a lot of people, myself included, felt like the Patriots would have a good shot at repeating. And the AFC title game was, there was a lot on the line. Brady versus Manning one more time and, all that good stuff. But it turned out to not really be about Brady versus Manning. It really just was Brady versus the defense of Denver. And Denver's defense was amazing. And they actually were amazing again this season as well. And they really carried that team to a championship. I'm not trying to take a whole lot away from Peyton Manning, but a lot of people wanted to write the narrative as Manning being this, amazingness, oh my God, greatest quarterback ever. And he really didn't have a whole lot to do with that Super Bowl championship or the reason why they were the number one seed in the AFC that year anyway, because Osweiler was the QB a lot of the season. And not only that, but the defense really was the main ingredient, I think, in that success. And again, on the other side, you have the Panthers at a 15-1 team. And boy, what a bad turnaround for them the following season. But man, what a great year it was for Carolina in 2015 into 16. And a lot of people, myself included, felt that Carolina was going to win that game. But defense does win championships, and I really think that Super Bowl was like the best example of defense wins championships that I've seen in a long time, because the defense was nasty all night long for Denver. And, Cam Newton and the Carolina offense, they could never get their feet wet, really. They could never really get going in that game. And it showed throughout. And Denver didn't even really need to drop a whole lot of points on them to take home the victory. And so, congratulations to Denver. I mean, they're a good franchise, and Coach Kubiak, unfortunately, he's stepped down at this point. But he was a great coach for that team, no question. Amazing defense, best in the league, no doubt that year. Von Miller, MVP. Yeah, you better believe it. And, Peyton Manning, good for him to go out on a Super Bowl championship, even though he was always one of those most hated guys around where I'm from, because, Peyton versus Brady is a long storied history there as two of the top QBs in the league. And, good for him to end on a Super Bowl. I can say that as someone who respects the game, respects greatness, and respects, great players. Although I don't think he has a lot to do with being credited for said Super Bowl. I will still say a ring's a ring, and he was on the team. So, and he started that game. It's not like, I'm not going to take everything away from him. Although I do think that the amount of credit for him winning that Super Bowl is not all that high. It was an interesting game, to say the least, though. Denver being champions, very strange. It's still weird to think about the Broncos actually winning that title. And now the ironic part is neither team making the playoffs this coming year. Just a crazy, crazy turnaround.
Yeah, that's basically what I was about to mention myself, how basically, yes, the defense was what carried the Broncos last season, and you mentioned the whole rivalry between Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, and whether or not we could give legitimate credit to Peyton Manning for the Super Bowl win from last season. But what I wanted to mention was, I don't think people realize that a lot of credit should be given out to Peyton Manning because of what happened this season. I mean, everybody thought, you could just put any quarterback on the Denver Broncos squad and ultimately they'd get back to the playoffs or win their division and maybe not win the Super Bowl, but at least get to the playoffs with that caliber defense. But little did they know that was not the case this season, because they did end up missing the season, or not the season. They did end up missing the playoffs this season. So I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Peyton Manning wasn't there. I mean, yes, the defense did help and carry the football team last season. Don't get me wrong, but because of Peyton Manning being there and being able to recognize that he had a situation where he didn't have all the pressure on him anymore, and that he did have a defense, Peyton Manning being able to recognize that and being a veteran quarterback, an experienced quarterback, he was able to take that knowledge and spread it on to his entire team and say, listen, guys, we don't need to do much here because we have a defense. Peyton Manning was able to recognize that, and I think that leadership lacked for the Denver Broncos this season, because whenever you have a Hall of Fame quarterback like a Peyton Manning on your team, obviously everyone is going to listen to you, they're going to follow you, and it's just a good vibe that you present and spread onto your entire team if you have a leader, because that leadership shows and it demonstrates. And I think Peyton Manning being there added that to the Denver Broncos last season, which gave them even more motivation, gave them more confidence, And that's why I think they were able to go on this run. I don't think you get to the Super Bowl or you win the Super Bowl without having a quarterback that's that big of a leader, to be quite honest with you. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it was Peyton Manning that ultimately won the Super Bowl with this team, because you don't say that. Like, you don't say that. You don't put any quarterback and think you can win the Super Bowl that way. I guarantee to you, if Brock Osweiler was the starter heading into the playoffs last season and Kubiak chose Osweiler over Peyton Manning, I think the outcome might have been a little bit differently, because first of all, we're dealing with a quarterback who's not experienced, never has played under pressure, never played in the playoffs. And you're telling me that guy, Brock Osweiler, would have taken the Broncos to the Super Bowl and win it all for them? I don't think so. He was bound to make mistakes, rookie mistakes in the playoffs. He was bound to show lack of leadership in the playoffs. So I just think that because Peyton Manning was there, and with his experience, his knowledge, and his greatness, I think with that being added on to the elite defense that they had, that was able to be enough for them to win the whole thing. And that's how I look at it now. You know, like, yes, he didn't have the greatest season. It might have been his worst season ever statistically, you know, because of his age and all. But at least he didn't turn the ball over. At least he didn't make those dumb rookie mistakes that you oftentimes see quarterbacks make in the playoffs. So I think people should give Peyton Manning more credit where credit is due in that regard, as far as last season, the Denver Broncos winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think he deserves a little bit of credit, but like I said, I still think it's minimal impact at the most for me in terms of just the overall presence of the team and the reason the team was able to be as successful as they were. Again, he got the job done. He did what he needed to do to get the job done, but this was no Peyton Manning of old, the guy who would, you know, actually, to be honest with you, it was better than the Peyton Manning of old in the postseason, because he was more of a one-and-done guy when it came to playoff games, more times than not. So actually, it was better and more reliable. But again, they relied more heavily on the run game a little bit too. I mean, it's not like he didn't pass the ball, but it was more minimal and short passes and stuff like that. So again, credit to Coach Kubiak for having an offense that actually fit into older Peyton Manning, and they were able to pull it out. So I mean, it was a surprising Super Bowl championship for Denver. But, once they got that number one seed, had home field advantage throughout the AFC, I figure if that game is in New England, because, again, the game was only decided by a couple of points, if the game's in New England, then you have Patriots and Carolina, and we're talking about a completely different Super Bowl. But because Denver did what they needed to do that year to get the number one seed, it goes to show you how important the seeding in the playoffs really is. So it was an amazing thing to see, especially because Carolina was so favored to do the job. They only lost one time all season. It just looked like they were going to roll their way. And I remember they blew out the NFC Championship game, and they were blowing out Seattle, although they did try to make a comeback on them in the first round. So, I mean, Carolina is just on a roll going into this game. But it shows you, again, defense wins championships, held to 10 points, a team that could easily put up 40 if you're not careful that season. I mean, that's an amazing performance from Denver. And, does this make Cam Newton a choke artist? I don't necessarily think that's enough of a sample size for me to say yes or no.
It does. I think it does.
I mean, I'll say this much. The biggest thing that points to that as a possibility, in my opinion, is the fact that, he didn't dive for that loose ball. But other than that, like, he didn't try to collapse onto the ball when it was going to be a turnover. That was just a moment where I feel like he lacked heart. But other than that, for me, I don't think this is enough of a sample size for it. I do think it makes him look bad, especially the way he carries himself afterwards. But I'm going to give it some time and let's see what happens, especially because in his first true run to the playoffs, he gets all the way to the championship game. I don't think we can quite label him as that yet. Especially when a lot of people were jumping to the defense of Peyton Manning for not being a choke artist, even though he was one and done in the playoffs 10 times. So I think we should give a little bit of time.
Yeah, but there's a difference between Peyton Manning and Cam Newton. Like with Cam Newton, I understand what you're saying. He's only been to the Super Bowl one time, so it wouldn't be fair to judge him on that regard. And he's also not been to the postseason as much as Peyton Manning has. But there's a reason why Cam Newton hasn't been to the postseason as much as Peyton Manning has, and that's because Cam Newton is also a choke artist in the regular season. Oftentimes, again, like example, this past season that just finished practically this past Sunday, Cam Newton and the Panthers. You said earlier they missed the playoffs this year after such controversy and negativity surrounding that Panthers organization, and much of it having to do with Cam Newton, the complaining, not having calls go his way, violating dress code. It was just constant controversy surrounding Cam Newton, a lot of distractions, and his focus not being in the game. I mean, that's always been the case for Cam Newton these last couple of seasons. And with Peyton Manning, at least he gets your team to the playoffs. At least he puts up spectacular Hall of Fame-like numbers that no other quarterback will probably reach for the next, 2 decades or something like that? I mean, those are numbers that speak for themselves. Whereas with Cam Newton, I mean, it's not like he's a rookie quarterback. He's been in the league for a few years now, So
yeah, I get where you're coming from, but I do think it's a little bit unfair to just put this whole season just on Newton, even though he's the guy who's in the headlines. I mean, I do think defensively, Carolina was really piss poor this year, and I don't know. I don't, and their offensive line had some injuries, and not only that, but there was a little understaffed. So I mean, I do think there were other reasons besides just Cam Newton's under par or over par performance, if we're talking in golf terms. But he was definitely not up to what you would have expected off of last season. Definitely a down year for Newton. I'm not downplaying what you said, but I do think there was many factors in why Carolina did not end up a playoff team this year. And when you really consider it, I just think the sample size is a little bit small with Newton. If over the next 3-4 seasons this continues, they continue to be a 7-9 team, or worse, or they never make the playoffs again the next 3 or 4 years, or they do but they're always one and done, then I think that you can kind of give him that reputation. But I mean, I don't know. I don't look at Cam Newton yet and say yes or no to that question. I just think the sample size is a little bit small. I think it's a little bit unfair to label someone as that early on in their career. I mean, I know he's not a rookie quarterback, but he's definitely still early in his career. I still think I'd like to see a little more out of him and a little more out of what will come from Carolina.
Well, I just think that with the current stage we're in regarding Cam Newton, I don't see a Super Bowl being attached to this man anytime soon, especially not with the attitude he's carrying in that locker room nowadays,
it could be a Colin Kaepernick situation in the future, because I mean, you look at Colin Kaepernick, he's the kind of guy who in 2012 and 13 people were hyping him up as a top 5 level quarterback, or at least a top 10 level quarterback, and this man, it was an absolute joke this season and has been pretty much since 2013. And it's not just him. Again, the 49ers as a team aren't good. It's not just the QB, but the QB what the QB does and says and is and acts and does, that has an impact. And it has nothing to do with him kneeling during the anthem. I don't care about that. That has nothing to do with this conversation. But what it does have something to do with is not the kneeling thing, but just Kaepernick in general, is the fact that he just ain't that good after all. So maybe Cam Newton will turn out to be that way. That's why, like I said, I'd like to see these next couple years before I really say, because I was not one of those people who was saying that Colin Kaepernick is going to be one of the best big things coming up in the game. I said, he looks good so far. Let's see where he is in a couple years. And now we're here, and I'm going to say he doesn't look very good. I would label him as a non-elite, non-decent quarterback that I wouldn't probably want on my team. And again, sometimes you just need that sample size for it. I think Cam Newton showed every bit of potential in the world last year when they went 15-1. But when you look back on the way that this season went, I definitely think that next year is a big tell-all season for him. If he has the type of year he had this year, then you're going to be talking about a guy who really didn't live up to expectation, at least thus far in his career. So I think this next coming year, he has something to prove. He needs to play with a chip on his shoulder, but not in the way that he has so far. I think he carries himself a little bit differently than maybe he should or ought to. But again, I'm not a professional. I'm not somebody who goes out there and suits up every week. So I probably have no business saying how he should or shouldn't carry himself. But I do think that he probably could be a little bit more mature about the way he handles press conferences, because that just isn't a good look on you or the team around you.
I mean, a lot of the things you just said, I would argue you could have made that case for him this season, because after last season and the Super Bowl, the way it ended, everyone was talking about this comeback story that Cam Newton was going to have to tell for this season and getting his revenge and his redemption. Much like Tom Brady in a way, with the whole suspension thing, that Cam Newton was going to have a chip on his shoulder this season. But it turned out that it was the complete opposite of that. So maybe for you, you're willing to give him like one more season, but I'm sorry, man. For me, like my patience has run thin with Cam Newton because again, like he's been in the league long enough to know that he should already be established at this point, developed, grown out of that immaturity stage, and it looks like he's still there, And to me, quite honest with you, it's pretty embarrassing that he hasn't been able to grow out of that stage yet, and it's already been like 6 years that he's been in the league, and he still hasn't figured it out. Like there's quarterbacks right now who have less time playing in the NFL who have already figured it out as far as being mature and all that. For example, like Russell Wilson, So it's pretty embarrassing when you think about it.
Yeah, and it all comes down to who you are as a person, and I think that's where you're seeing that lack of maturity. That's just who he is. It doesn't mean that he's less. I'm not bashing him as a person, but Russell Wilson's like a religious man who has very strong beliefs and all that. So Russell Wilson comes from a different type of he's cut from a different cloth, I guess you could say, and he's a really respectable guy. He's like one of the people who you would want to represent the NFL. You know what I mean? Right now, like in terms of ethical and good imagery, Russell Wilson's one of those poster childs because he's just that well established. But I think it's a good comparison with Tom Brady to a certain extent. The difference is Tom Brady has a humongous legacy already behind him before this year in the suspension, and then he went out there and had one of his best seasons of his career at 39 years old. Now we'll see what happens with Cam Newton. Let's see if he can turn it around. If he has a big year this coming year, I will definitely say that I still see something in him. The fact that he's been to the Super Bowl is why I'm giving him more time, because he got there and because that team was that strong that year. It showed me what he can do when he's on his game. So that's why I want to give it a little more time. If he doesn't get to the Super Bowl in a 15-1 team and then they have this type of season, I'm probably in the exact same boat as you. But because they did get to the title game, and I know they didn't win it, and I know that they didn't look too good in it, but I got to give him props for getting there, because a lot of quarterbacks have come and gone and never even so much as get a chance to play in a Super Bowl. And there he was leading the Panthers in there. So,
and we're going to touch a little bit more on Tom Brady going forward, because I don't know if you know this, Evan, but later on we're going to have an NFL MVP debate. So knowing you, I think I might know who you might go with as far as that's concerned. But anyway, to continue the year in review of sports for the year 2016, we move on to another topic here that actually Evan chose this one. Evan, if you don't know, is also a huge hockey fan. He follows hockey more than I do. I think you're a big fan of the Boston Bruins. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And they unfortunately lost 3-0 last night, but we won't talk about that.
But basically the topic for discussion for this one is the Pittsburgh Penguins being the 2016 Stanley Cup champions, and they won the series 4-2 over the San Jose Sharks. So, Evan, take it away here.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on this because I feel like we haven't really talked NHL much at all, and I know that you, Lucas, don't follow it the same way that I do. But I think it was if you want to do a year in review, I do think part of that year in review does have to include the 4 major American sports at least. And so the Pittsburgh Penguins winning the championship, kind of another surprise for me. I really wasn't expecting the Penguins to be the champions this year. I actually wasn't expecting the Sharks or the Penguins to get into the Stanley Cup Finals this past season at all. And it ended up turning out to be a pretty entertaining finals because the Sharks are one of those teams that they've been on the verge of being a real contender, but every time they end up blowing a lead. They, in fact, even blew a 3-0 series lead to the LA Kings in one a couple of years back. as well. And this series in the finals was actually very entertaining. You had some very close games. In fact, the first three were all decided by just one goal, and Pittsburgh ultimately took it in 6. And this is the second Stanley Cup championship for Sid the Kid, Sidney Crosby, who many will argue is or is not the greatest player in hockey right now. In my personal opinion, I do think he is the top player in the NHL, even though I'm not a big Sidney Crosby fan, because as a Bruins fan, you just can't be. But I got to give him his due credit. He is a great player in this league, and he's cementing his legacy. As with his second Stanley Cup championship, he won his first one back in 2009. So you look at this guy now and you say, is he cementing himself as an all-time great NHL player? And I honestly have to say, I really think that him winning a second Stanley Cup does add to that legacy, because winning a bunch of Stanley Cup championships is nowhere near as easy as it is to win a bunch of NBA championships or even a bunch of Super Bowls, in my opinion. I think the Stanley Cup championship is the hardest to win out of the 4 major American sports. I mean, obviously that can be debated all night, all day, every day as to what's the hardest and what's the easiest title to win. In fact, I actually think that would be a cool topic for a future show for us to talk about. But the Stanley Cup championship, in my opinion, is the toughest to win, and the Penguins, having done it twice with Sidney Crosby as their captain, as their top center, as their top scorer, as their top player, no question shows you just how good he really is. And again, his individual accomplishment may not be the greatest aspect of this particular Stanley Cup Finals, but his impact on the team is what really shows off. So I think Sidney Crosby is just cementing his legacy as one of the top players of this generation, whether a lot of us like it or not. He really is one hell of a player. And that Stanley Cup Championship Series, even though it was between two teams that you may not have expected to be there, damn, was it a good series. I really enjoyed it. And I really think that we saw a lot of potential out of San Jose, which is a team that, again, kind of came out of nowhere. I expected either the St. Louis Blues or the Chicago Blackhawks to beat them. And they got to where they got for a good reason. So good on them, and good on the Penguins for also getting past the Washington Capitals, who I thought were the strongest team in the Eastern Conference last year as well. So a heck of a Stanley Cup Finals, and no question a great year again for hockey. Unfortunately, my Bruins did not make the playoffs, but again, we don't have to talk about that. We can just move on without mentioning the fact that the Bruins, unfortunately, again, didn't make it. But good on the Penguins, and it was a heck of a series that honestly I think has a lot of living up to do for this year. I'm interested to see who's actually going to make it, because you have a couple of teams right now, the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are on this unbelievable winning streak right now. The Minnesota Wild just lost to them, actually, and they were both on a huge winning streak. So you have some different faces and teams in there, and you did a little bit last year too, like the Florida Panthers were a big team last year. So I'm kind of enjoying NHL more so, less from the Bruins perspective, because they're kind of falling out of favor. They're kind of a mediocre middle-of-the-road team right now. And I'm just enjoying the fact that there's new and different teams getting to the Cup Finals, and that it's very unpredictable. And that's what I love about hockey so much. That's what draws me in to the NHL, is because you never really know who's going to make it. Whereas the NBA, you kind of have an idea. The NFL, you kind of have an idea. Even MLB, you kind of have an idea. But when it comes to NHL, anything can happen. I mean, we saw it a few years ago when the LA Kings were the 8th seed and won the entire thing. So I think that's what makes hockey so interesting, and definitely a cool Stanley Cup Finals, and I'm really looking forward to what happens this year as well.
Any bold predictions for 2017 as far as who could make the Stanley Cup Finals?
Oh, man, I really am not sure who's going to do it this year. I don't know. I got to say, Columbus, the Blue Jackets, the way they're playing right now, it is on another level. And they're not a team who you necessarily would ever have thought, oh yeah, they're going to be the best team in the league this year. So I actually think Columbus might be that team. They might have a real shot. But you can't really count out a team like Montreal, who's had a really good year this year. Now last year they started out real hot and then just died off. It was unbelievable how fast they just went to nowhere. So I think Montreal could have a shot, and no Canadian team has won the Cup since 1993. So you got to believe one of these Canadian teams wants to get in there and try to end that drought for themselves.
And Canada is known for their hockey.
Absolutely. So it's very strange that it's been all these years, no Canadian team with a cup since '93. So no question. And the Vancouver Canucks had a real good shot at it in 2011, but a certain Bruins team up here in Boston ended those hopes in a 7th game victory. But
yeah,
I digress.
yeah, and for me, obviously, I support the New York Rangers. So I'm pretty sure you don't want to hear about that. But yeah, let's see where things go, because I know that the New York Rangers are usually always in the playoffs. Of course, the last couple of years, though, there's been different outcomes there that normally us New Yorkers haven't liked. But anything is possible, as you said.
Yeah, that year they got in the Cup Finals was I was actually surprised they got in that year, and it was unfortunate that they came away short, because I was actually rooting for them that year to win the Cup, because it's been a long time for the Rangers, and it would have been cool if they had taken away the title. But I believe that was the year the Kings ended up winning their 2nd Stanley Cup in just a couple of years, and then the Blackhawks have won 3. So it's actually been kind of consistent with teams winning as of late. So I'm very intrigued this year with a lot of new possibilities on the horizon.
Oh yeah, definitely. So we have that to look forward to, and thanks Evan there for the inside scoop on the NHL. Maybe we should make that a segment on the show in the future.
Absolutely.
But anyway, we move on to the next big topic here that happened in 2016. And that, of course, were the Cleveland Cavaliers winning the first ever NBA championship, epic 7-game series. The Golden State Warriors, they blew a 3-1 lead, which they have become very famous for in the last year.
Oh, yeah. Especially in Facebook comments.
Oh, yeah. That's so...
my.
you see that every single day on all the message boards and whatnot.
And it's funny because now it's things that aren't even related to the NBA in any way, shape, or form. Like, it could be about the NFL. Like, here are your stats leaders for the 2016 season. And the top comment is, oh, well, that's great. Well, here's the numbers. Now you subtract it from this and that. And, Golden State blew a 3-1 lead. Or don't let this distract you from the fact that the Warriors blew a lead to the Cavaliers. And then they also did the same thing on Christmas Day 2016. They had a 14-point fourth quarter lead and blew it to the Cavs. Unbelievable. And that's with Kevin Durant on the Warriors. My goodness. This team they can't live down these miracle comebacks from the Cavs. And but credit due to the Cavaliers though for that comeback. I'll tell you something, when it was 3-1 and Golden State had blown them out in a couple of those games, I thought that series was so over. I said, man, the Warriors really just proving, because they had just beaten the Cavs the year before, really just proving they are the superior team. And then Cleveland pulled out, in my opinion, the greatest NBA comeback ever, by far.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing about that NBA Finals from last season. I might have a different opinion from you, Evan, because it sounds like you give a lot of credit to the Cavaliers and LeBron James. I do too, but I also believe that had Draymond Green not been suspended for that Game 6, I believe it was. Was it Game 6?
Yeah, I believe it was. Because I think so. I'm pretty sure.
It might have been either Game 5. Well, actually, I think it might have been Game 5, because I do remember they were at home, the Golden State Warriors were, and Draymond Green wasn't there to play that game at Oracle. And then they came back Game 6, and that's where Draymond Green, I think, came back to play in Cleveland. But I'm not sure. But all I know is, had Draymond Green not been suspended in one of those final games of the series, I think the outcome could have been a little bit differently, because we did see how much of an impact Draymond Green makes for that Warriors team. And he was very physical, very aggressive from the start of the postseason last season, with the whole vicious kicks and the low blows to Steven Adams.
Poor Steven Adams. That guy just didn't deserve it.
Yeah, but basically, throughout the whole playoffs, Draymond Green was playing at a spectacular level, and he was very physical. He got physical with LeBron James as well in that series, and I think LeBron James probably had enough of it. And LeBron James, being the smart player that he was, he knew how close suspension Draymond Green was, and he said, why not go for it, and that's essentially what he did. He took him out, and because of that, I think the Cavaliers had a bit of an advantage. And when you lose a player like that, obviously your team is going to lose a little bit of confidence because they don't have one of their star pieces there. So I think that's kind of what happened, and it got inside the Warriors' heads, to be quite honest with you. But I also do think Steph Curry was not 100%. Like, I know people think that's an excuse because he was still healthy. Yes, he was healthy, but I do think he was worn out. He
did. Remember, he tweaked his knee against the Trailblazers a couple rounds earlier in the playoffs. So he did have a little bit of a tweak, but I will not give them that pass on as far as for Curry because his shooting was just flat out bad, in my opinion. He was bricking everything. It was nothing like the shooting that we saw from him during the season, which was lights out, unbelievable, one of the best shooting performances in a season of all time, no question about it. And then the postseason comes, and it was the other way around. I think the biggest problem for the Warriors last year was the fact that they were trying so hard to chase 73-9, and they did it, but they tried so hard to chase that record that I don't think they were chasing the ring as hard as they chased the record. And by the time they got to that ring, they got to those 4 rounds, those 16 wins they needed, I think that they were too tired out, and they were exhausted from trying so damn hard just to get that 73-9 record. And I think that because it's the grind of an 82-game season, let's be honest. The NBA is a really tough game to play in. I have always argued, and I know I'm in the minority, but I've always argued that the NBA is one of the, but outside of NFL football, the hardest sport to play in. And a lot of people who are fans of soccer, any other, even hockey might argue that those are more difficult and demanding sports. But I personally believe that basketball is more demanding. And that's mainly because of the fact that you're running up and down the court nonstop. It's a hard surface, and jumping up and down for rebounds and things like that, and for shots and all that does so much wear and tear on your arms and your legs. Have you ever gone out and you played a game of basketball for a pickup game and you haven't played in a long time? Yeah, feel how your arms feel the next day when you can barely lift them above your head. It's unbelievable, and it's just from shooting around for the first time in a while. Trust me, I know what it feels like. So I just think that the NBA and basketball in general is one of the most difficult and physical and hard sports there is out there. I'm never going to argue that it's harder than football because that would just be a stupid argument. But Cleveland and Golden State were both teams that had fought very hard to be at the top of their conferences that year. The difference from 2016 NBA Finals from 2015 NBA Finals is that the Cleveland Cavaliers were 100%, whereas in 2015 they weren't close. Remember, Kevin Love got knocked out in the first round because Kelly Olynyk on my Boston Celtics, unfortunately, Kelly Olynyk, not exactly a guy I'm a humongous fan of, but he, got Kevin Love's shoulder out of place. That was happened back in the first round. And not only that, but you also had Kyrie, who had gotten hurt as well. He hurt his ankle, I believe, or something like that. And so basically it was LeBron James trying to carry the rest of the Cavaliers against Golden State. And that, it just wasn't going to happen. And now you fast forward to a year later, you have the Warriors who are at about 85%. Because, Curry's injury and also Draymond's suspension, and you have the Cavs at 100%. But the Warriors are still supposed to be the better team. They're deeper. They had a bigger bench, a better bench, no question, than Cleveland. And yet they still managed to blow that 3-1 series lead. And I do believe that Draymond being suspended did play a little role, but I think Draymond is his biggest enemy. He gets too heated, he gets too hot, and he gets way too worried about little things. I remember I watched them on Christmas Day in Cleveland. Again, this man, 3 minutes into the game, almost got himself tossed. He already had picked up one technical, and he was still screaming at the refs after. And honestly, for a lot of players, that might have been a second technical, but they let it go. This is a guy who has kind of earned himself a reputation at being somebody who's a very big hothead. That's on Draymond Green, not on anybody else. Now, I'm not saying all the calls have always gone his way, because they can't, because that's how the game is. You're not always going to get calls to go your way. And I understand that frustration. That is hugely frustrating. Trust me, I get frustrated in NBA 2K when a call doesn't go my way, and I'm just playing a video game. Never mind when you're out on the court and you're actually playing. It's very frustrating, don't get me wrong, but you got to corral those emotions, and I think that's on Draymond. So I want to give a lot of credit to Cleveland because of the way they were able to win Game 7, which was one of the best basketball games I have ever watched in my entire life. Unbelievable ball game. And The main reason why it was so memorable for me is the chase down block from LeBron James, followed up by the 3-pointer from Kyrie Irving, the dagger 3. Unbelievable stuff from those guys. And they earned it. They went out and earned it. And it's, like I said, to me, the greatest comeback I've ever seen in basketball. Cleveland able to overcome the greatest regular season team in history, 73-9 Golden State Warriors, unstoppable, best 3-point shooting team ever. They proved that a shooting team can win a title the year before. So it's there's no more doubt as to whether or not a team that has an offense drawn up around the perimeter can't win a title, because they just did it the year prior. But damn, what a comeback by Cleveland.
Yeah, and to talk about the Cavs now for me, I think this does give credit to LeBron James here for being able to accomplish that feat. I'll never forget that block in Game 7 where he just completely decimated Andre Iguodala. I mean, that was just completely amazing right there by LeBron James. But keep in mind, Kyrie Irving did have a lot to do with that and why they were able to win, because of his clutch performance, just having that killer instinct and choosing to win the game himself by putting up so many shots and scoring so many points. I'm not saying LeBron James wasn't able to do that, but Kyrie Irving was doing that with LeBron James. Like, they both, it wasn't just LeBron. It was Kyrie Irving who was part of this as well. And you could make an argument that it was actually Kyrie Irving that showed up more than LeBron James did. Now, as far as defense goes and rebounds and assists and getting the whole team involved, yes, I give that to LeBron James. But when it comes to just like being clutch and taking over a basketball game and just putting it all on your shoulders as far as scoring is concerned, that was all Kyrie Irving, in my opinion.
Yeah. See, now to me, like, I also think like Kevin Love never gets enough love, and I'm a big Kevin Love guy. I've always wanted him to come to the Celtics. I'm not gonna lie to you. He's always been a guy, because it's been rumored a couple of different times, and I was so like, please, Kevin Love. I think the guy is a great player, and I think that the reason he kind of he kind of takes on the Chris Bosh role that he had on the Heat. Because you had D Wade, who was like Kyrie, LeBron, who's like LeBron, same guy, and then you got, Chris Bosh and Kevin Love, who kind of become that third wheel in the big three, but their role is still very important. Like Kevin Love, if you watch the final sequence, the final possession of that Game 7, when Golden State is trying to hit that big shot and try to, get back into the game, Kevin Love's defense on Stephen Curry is the reason why there was no easy shot for them. And not only that, but he's the kind of guy who might only give you 9 to 15 points a game, anywhere in that range, but he had like 15 or 16 rebounds in that game. The guy's a rebounding machine. He's a great post player. Even if he's not pouring in 32 points a game like the other two might, he's still going to be that guy. He's like a glue guy. He keeps your team together, and he's so vital. And this year, his impact is being felt even more so, I feel, because he's putting up more points a game and he's getting more rebounds a game this year than he has since he's been on Cleveland. I just think Kevin Love is a great player who doesn't get enough credit for what he does, because he does all the little things. He does the things that don't necessarily show up on the stat sheet and may not necessarily show up in the highlight package, but he does the little things. He plays that transition defense. He plays the perimeter D when he needs to, and he does what he can to get rebounds and to create second chances for his offense. So Kevin Love also deserves a lot of credit. So this Cleveland team cannot just be accredited to LeBron James. Now, I'll admit, without LeBron James, that team probably doesn't even make the NBA Finals, because a team like the Celtics could easily beat that team. I'm not going to say easily, but they could beat that team without LeBron James. You throw LeBron James in, he's the most complete player in the NBA, and that's why he's the best player in the world, in my opinion, because he's the most complete player, not because he's the best scorer, not because he's the best defender, but he's great at everything. That's why he's so good. That's why he's the best. Even though I will agree, Kyrie, best scorer on that team. He's the most dynamic scorer on the Cavaliers. He can shoot from anywhere. He can come into the post. He can fly. The man can fly into the paint. It's unbelievable. And he can pull up from three and nail it. It's unreal how good he is. So yes, his three-point shot was just as important as LeBron's chase down block, but without the block, there's no three-pointer, and without that block, there's no championship. So I still think LeBron James's play, I think that's the most defining career of that man's the most defining play of that man's career. I really do. And not only that, but winning a championship in 2 different cities and now a 3-time champion, LeBron James is cementing his legacy as a top 10 all-time player. And that's crazy for me to say that because I've never been a big LeBron James supporter, but I respect him so much. And last year's finals made me respect him more than I ever have before because of how well he played. He played with heart, he played with grit, he played with determination, and then the emotions spilled out of him when they won. And you knew that that's how much heart and determination he played with. I mean, it's amazing. But to your point about Kyrie Irving, the man's only, 24 or 25 years old, and he's already won a championship, and he's on part of this team. This guy has the capability in the future to be anything he wants. He can be one of the greatest players of all time. He's already one of the best players in the league, and I don't even think he gets enough credit. I think Kyrie doesn't get enough credit. The man is unbelievable. I mean, I think he might be the best point guard in the league right now. Outside of Steph Curry's ability to shoot from outside, I think the more complete player is still Kyrie. I would take Kyrie over Steph Curry. I know that might sound like risky and like, what do you mean? But if Steph Curry has an off night from beyond the arc, which he's had many times this year, he's had multiple nights where he went 0 for 8, 0 for 9, Kyrie Irving always is going to drop 15 or 20 points for you. Actually, Isaiah Thomas is always going to drop points for you on the Celtics. You know, his dynamic scoring ability is more dynamic, in my opinion, than Steph Curry's. And so is Kyrie Irving. They both are. So much credit to Irving as well. I agree with that 100%. But I still think LeBron James is the true defining piece to what makes Cleveland championship basketball team. And man, that was the best finals that I could imagine. Even though that's probably the 2 teams that'll face each other again, I actually, if it can't be the Celtics, I want it to be Warriors and Cavs again. I can't get enough of these 2 teams matching up against each other. It's like the two best rivals in WWE going at it. It's like AJ Styles and John Cena wrestling. You know, for me, it's exciting. I like it. It's not Randy Orton and John Cena, which I'm tired of and bored with. It's still fresh. They'll find something new and amazing to make out of it. So I can't wait if they're going to face each other in the finals again this year, because their Christmas Day matchup was every bit as intense as their finals matchup. I loved it. And it doesn't matter who wins for me, because, I'm not a fan of either team. But if the Warriors lose with Kevin Durant on top of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green to the Cavaliers, then they're just proving that that LeBron James truly is the best, and that Kyrie and Kevin Love are a better supporting cast for the best player in the world. And they're not even really supporting cast. They're on the main script too. They're just as important. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and a lot of experts are arguing, and I'll go ahead and support this argument, that if LeBron James is able to accomplish that some point in his career, whether it's this season or next season, if he's able to go to the finals once again with the Cleveland Cavaliers and beat the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, many people will argue that LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time, that he would have surpassed Michael Jordan, because LeBron James would ultimately have beaten the dream team, like the big team, and there's that argument that Michael Jordan was never able to do that. Now, of course, he beat the Lakers, but that was back when they were almost done, or So with LeBron James here, if he's able to accomplish that, I don't think anybody can doubt him anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this championship that they just won already cements his legacy as at least a top 15 all-time player. When you bring him into a championship this year against Durant, plus the rest of the Warriors, which already are an amazing team, they won 73 games without Durant, and now they have Durant. Like, what the hell is going on? This team is unbelievable. There's no reason why the Warriors shouldn't win. Nobody should think that the Warriors won't win the championship. They should be everybody's favorite for the finals. They have to be. I mean, look at that team. I mean, even without a good, solid bench around them, like we've talked about already, that starting 5 is unreal. Even with the 5th guy being Zaza Pachulia, it doesn't matter. That guy could be whoever you want. It could be me or you, and it's not going to matter. The other 4 guys are absolute superstars, and that is the best starting 5 ever. Even though one of the starting 5 isn't even that big of a deal, the other 4 are NBA all team, first team NBA players potentially. They might not all make that this year. Don't get me wrong, but they all have that capability. Absolutely, every last one of them. And you have potential defensive player of the year in Draymond Green. That's unreal to me. What a team they are. And Green can score too. The guy can put up 15 or 20 points a game. Plus you have Klay Thompson, who is just as sharp of a shooter as Steph Curry, if not sharper. Steph Curry, who can do all these amazing things, and then Kevin Durant, the best shooter in the entire league. What's going on? And honestly, if you stack those teams up together, and the Cavaliers are able to pull it out again, I really do think LeBron James versus Michael Jordan becomes a much bigger debate as to who the better player is. Absolutely, I think it's already gained a lot of ground since last year, but I think if he wins again this year, he not only gains ground, but he's almost up there. He's almost up there because you have to think the teams that Michael Jordan played were great. Don't get me wrong. They all earned their spot into the finals against the Bulls, but damn, you can't say that Michael Jordan won all those championships by himself either. You can't claim that because when you have Scottie Pippen on your team, who is just as vital as, the next guy, let's say, if we're going to say LeBron versus, Michael Jordan, then let's compare, Kyrie and Scottie Pippen. You know what I mean? Those guys are extremely vital. Scottie Pippen could drop 25 a game too. Let's not forget that. And then also add in Dennis Rodman. Wow, you got a big three there too, don't you? Everybody likes to just talk about Jordan as if he's on this level that no one else could ever possibly attain. And trust me, I think Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time. I am one of those people who thinks Jordan's the greatest, the GOAT, 100%. But I'm playing devil's advocate here, and I'm going to argue against my own opinion and say I do believe that LeBron James, if he wins a title this year, my opinion will shift on this. I will believe that LeBron James is just about, if not already, on the level of Michael Jordan. LeBron is an amazing ball player. He's dynamic. He can do anything. And Michael Jordan could too, don't get me wrong, but LeBron James, he's already won a championship with two different teams, and how many years in a row has he been in the finals? He was in there 4 years in a row with Miami, 2 years in a row now with Cleveland, so that's already 6 straight seasons he's been to the NBA Finals. And if he gets there again this year, which I have no reason to doubt he won't, that's 7 in a row. That's a record outside of in the modern day, outside of the Celtics in the 60s. That's a modern record. That's unbelievable. You know what I mean? I think he's the first player since Bill Russell to reach 6 consecutive finals. Pretty sure that's what the record is. And you gotta give him props to being on that level. But it's not all about rings either. You know what I mean? I don't want the only argument between LeBron James and Michael Jordan to be, well, Michael won 6 rings, and let's just say LeBron only wins 4. Or he wins 1 more. He wins 4, and that's it. And I'm sorry, but that doesn't automatically qualify Jordan as being better, because if that was true, then that means that Bill Russell is better than Michael Jordan because he won 11. But that's not necessarily true, because even though Bill Russell won 11 championships, the Celtics were amazing every year because guess what? They played team basketball, and Bill Russell was just a part of the formula. He wasn't everything. He was one of the centerpieces, but he wasn't the entire team. And people got to remember that about Jordan and LeBron when they argue for their cases as the greatest player of all time. Who makes the greatest individual impact? It doesn't mean you won more rings than the other guy. Because, again, if LeBron finishes with 4 titles and Kobe had 5, are we really going to say, Kobe's better than LeBron just because he had 1 more ring? Or are we going to say Kobe's better than LeBron because A, he could shoot better, B, he was more of a team leader, this, that, the other? Even though I actually think LeBron has surpassed Kobe Bryant. But again, that's a different time, a different show for us. But anyway, LeBron James, the amount of respect that I have for him now after that finals, it's grown exponentially. If we did this show in January 3rd, 2016, just a year ago, I would have had a different view on LeBron James, no question. I have gained a lot of respect for him.
And this has risen him to a whole other level now in terms of respect and legacy. So, yes, huge credit to LeBron James. But now I really do want to see this matchup because I think that's what will put the entire debate to bed as far as LeBron James being the greatest if he's able to beat the Warriors with Kevin Durant. So I guess we just have to wait and see that matchup. It's going to be interesting and compelling for sure, and I know I'll become the biggest defender of LeBron James if he's able to accomplish that. But he hasn't yet, but there was a little sneak peek that he possibly can make it happen again. As you mentioned earlier, Christmas Day, the Cavs beat the Warriors, just barely though they hung on. Anyway, we move on to the next big thing that happened in 2016, and that was, of course, the Chicago Cubs finally winning the World Series in an epic 7-game series after 108 years, a 108-year drought. The Cubs were finally able to win it all, and in the year 2016, they became world champions. We were just talking about 3-1 leads being blown. Well, that's exactly what the other Cleveland team, the Cleveland Indians of MLB baseball, that's what they did. They blew the 3-1 lead. The curse was reversed. But what this series was mostly known for was that Game 7 and how good, how incredible that Game 7 was. In fact, I remember you and I were on Twitter that night exchanging messages talking about, was that the greatest game we've ever seen, period. Not just in baseball, but in all of sports. Absolutely. And I got to admit, it's up there, man. Maybe if I was a Cub fan or if I was an Indian fan, I would say it's number one. But it's definitely up there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you know, this is when you can kind of debate, because you had two like unreal Game 7s this year. You know, the NBA Finals Game 7 and then this Game 7. Like, I mean, that's an overload, you know. I don't know which one was better, honestly. I got to go with the World Series Game 7 because I lost it. I lost it when Rajai Davis hit that home run and tied the game. Not because I was rooting for anyone, but because I couldn't believe that the game got tied in Game 7 and that we were actually going to potentially face extra innings. And it was off Aroldis Chapman, the guy who, you know, you can't beat, right? But, oh, my God. Rajai Davis, well, he was, I know you're going to probably talk about him being overused, and he was at that point. He was, but still, the fact that he was able to hit that home run is still a big deal. I've never seen a Game 7 with more drama. It's everything a Game 7 should be, and then some. The drama was there, the back and forth action was there, the way the runs were scored, the home run that tied the game, LeBron James being in the crowd just going absolutely nuts. I mean, the whole thing, just it's like the city of Cleveland just came unglued in that moment. And then the rain delay and the way that like changed the momentum. The Cubs come up and score a couple runs right away, and then Davis comes back. They get an extra run again. Chris Bryant almost slips and falls on the final play of the game. Like it's just, the drama was unbelievable. But man, we need to get The Rock in here so he can say, finally, the Cubs have won the championship after 108 years, and I can't help but say congratulations to the Cubs and all their loyal and amazing fans who stuck with them over all that time. And a lot of people lived and died and never got to see the Cubs win the championship, and it's a real shame that they didn't. But you know, their sons, their grandsons, their granddaughters, their daughters, their nieces, nephews, whatever they may be to them, they did get to see it, and so that spirit lives on. But man, 108 years. Hey, you know, in Beantown, we know what it's like to have a drought. 86 years of our own without a World Series, and a lot of heartbreak along the way. But I gotta say, if I wasn't a Red Sox fan and 2004 hadn't happened, I will tell you right now that this would be the greatest baseball game that I've ever seen, was Game 7 of this World Series. But I do have to say that because I'm a Red Sox fan, and I will always, my favorite will be anything in 2004. I don't even know which game in particular. I guess Game 4 of the ALCS, you know, no offense to the Yankees, but god damn was that amazing. But, you know, any of that whole series for me is the coolest thing. But, you know, if I wasn't a Red Sox fan, was just a baseball fan in general, I think this might actually top that, or at least be right up there with it. No question about it. Amazing.
Well, here's what I think, because, yes, you predicted what I was going to say earlier about Aroldis Chapman. For some odd reason, going into that, I believe it was the 8th inning. Yeah, it was the 8th inning. Going into that inning, or when Chapman came in from relief, there was only 2 outs. 2 outs. You already had 2 outs in that 8th inning, and the reliever just had to get one more out. But Madden decides to put in Aroldis Chapman to get one more out for him in that 8th inning instead of just waiting until the 9th inning came. And he took out John Lester. I believe that was the man he took out. He took John Lester out of the game, who John Lester, all he needed was to record one more out to get out of that 8th inning. In that situation, I knew something was up. I knew something didn't feel right. Like you could almost tell that Chapman was going to screw up. It's almost as if Madden set him up for failure there in that 8th inning. I would have had no problem had he brought in Chapman in the 9th inning. But I think it was ultimately the biggest mistake for him to bring him in the 8th inning when you just needed one more out from John Lester. And instead, you go to Chapman in the 8th. That made absolutely no sense whatsoever, and you bring him in with a runner in scoring position or a runner on base. Chapman, that was not his strength. You don't bring him in when there's runners on bases because that sets you up for failure, and that's what you saw happen in that 8th inning. So I just had that feeling. Like I remember, I said it. I had it in my mind. I was like, okay, something ugly is about to unfold here for the Cubs. And I was thinking to myself, the curse is really alive. Here we go again. The Cubs are about to fail. And that's exactly what happened. Davis hits that home run, and I was like, oh, man, what did he just do here? So he's very fortunate. He's very lucky that the Chicago Cubs were still able to come away with the victory that night, because I guarantee to you right now, if the Cleveland Indians were crowned your champions, Madden wouldn't have that job. He wouldn't be the manager of the Chicago Cubs right now, and everyone in Chicago would be calling for his head. But looking back at it, that was probably the biggest boneheaded decision that Madden could have made. Again, I would have had no problem if he brought him in the 9th. I'm not saying Chapman shouldn't have pitched at all in that game. Obviously, he was the best closer in the playoffs. But bringing him in the 8th inning in a situation where you're doomed and you're kind of setting him up for failure, that was wrong. And on top of that, we all knew he was worn out. His arm was tired. So all of that was just chaos. And I can't believe Madden went with that. But looking back at it now, I guess we have to thank Madden as a baseball fan because of that, we were able to get extra innings and a classic inning unfolded in the 8th inning. And we got potentially what was the greatest Game 7 ever. So as a baseball fan, I'm thankful. But if I was a teammate or if I was a baseball player on the Cleveland Indians team or on the Chicago Cubs team, I would be extremely upset had, that not gone our way. You know what I'm trying to say? So, yeah,
sure.
That was a great Game 7. Don't get me wrong. But it was also scary for the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, it sure was. They honestly, Chapman was so overworked in that series because Madden had used him so much, and to be fair, Francona had used somebody like an Andrew Miller an awful lot too. This was an interesting playoff run for me in 2016 because you had the Indians as a team who were pretty good. They got matched up with the Red Sox in the first round, and I'm thinking, as a Red Sox fan, I'm thinking, okay, this team definitely a good one, no question. But I had a feeling, my prediction was the Sox were going to win the series. And that's not just because I'm biased and I'll always say my team wins. I know when my team is outmatched and probably won't win. But I felt that was not the case here. I thought we were going to win that series. And they came in and they swept our ass. We just got dismantled. We got beat up. And I mean, it's not like they killed us in every game. Actually, 2 of the games were only decided by a run. So again, it was a very close 3 games, but they were the better team, and they deserved to win, and I gave them all the credit in the world when they did so. It sucked to see David Ortiz's career end in that way, but God, I do want to take that 1 second to say, man, David Ortiz, what a season. I know we might talk about it a little more, but what a year for him at 40 years old. But yeah, the Indians, what a run for them. And then they run through the Blue Jays in 5 games, so you're thinking, wow, this team, they've only lost once going into the World Series. That's insane. Whereas the Cubs, they had a 4-game series with San Fran, and then they had a 6-game series against LA Dodgers, and then here they are. So they had a little more struggles. In fact, they were actually behind in the series to the Dodgers, 2-1. And so you're thinking to yourself, maybe the Dodgers can hang on and do something against this team. And San Fran almost had it too, and they blew Game 4. If they didn't blow Game 4, that would have gone to a Game 5. In San Francisco, in the even number years, you don't want to have them in the World Series because they're going to win. But man, what a playoffs this was. You saw a lot of relievers getting used for extended periods of time, and two of those were Aroldis Chapman and Andrew Miller for the two teams that made the World Series. And I think both guys were pretty burnt out by the time they got to the World Series. But those last 3 games for Chapman were too much because he's a flamethrower. He's the kind of guy who should not be throwing too many pitches, and he was. And that was the real issue with him, I think. And then that Game 7, he was burnt the F out. And with how burnt out he was with Madden, being the type of manager who, in my opinion, I don't think Madden's that good of a manager. I've never been a big Joe Madden fan, in fact, as a manager, not as a person or a human being or any of the rest of it. Joe Madden seems like a cool dude, but his managing, I've always thought, was a little bit questionable. He's always been different, I'll give him that, but I don't really like the way he manages. Whereas Terry Francona, I may have a little bit of a bias toward because he was in Boston for years, and helped us win 2 World Series, but his managing style is spectacular, one of the best managers in the world. And us letting him go was still stupid as hell. But honestly, I felt that Francona outmanaged Madden the whole series, but it's not about who outmanages who. It's about who outperforms who on the field, on the diamond. And ultimately, it was the Cubs who came away with it. But I think the Cubs got a little bit fortunate. I really do, because the Indians earned their way back into that game after a tough start. A leadoff home run to Dexter Fowler. It just spelled trouble for them right away. They climbed back into that game. They brought in John Lester. He throws a wild pitch, 2-run score. Wow, big deal right there. Then all of a sudden you get that Rajai Davis home run. We're tied. We got a brand new ball game. The rain delay, I really think, I'm a superstitious fan in certain ways, I really do think that the rain delay curbed the momentum of the Indians. I'm not saying it gave the Cubs the win, but I think it hurt the momentum the Indians were feeling because they had just tied the ball game. Here we are, brand new day. Here we go. Let's go. It's all set. And then all of a sudden, rain delay. And they bring out the same pitcher, Shaw. They bring him back out after, all that time. Was it 40 minutes or whatever it was? He comes out and he's cold. He's very cold. He gives up a couple of big hits, 2-run score. They try to come back in the bottom of the inning. They get one back with Rajai Davis again, but then the game comes to an end. So you have to consider that rain delay definitely did throw a wrench into the plans of the Indians, who may very well, if the game had continued on as it was going to, may very well have come away with a win. I mean, imagine a walk-off win in Game 7 of the World Series for the Indians. But you know what? It's amazing to see the Cubs win. It is sad for the Indians, though, because it's been a long-ass time for them, too. It had been, 68 years for them as well. So, I mean, it's not like the Indians have won recently. So, either way, it was going to be cool for the World Series. But no question in my mind, the greatest Game 7 that I've witnessed and gotten into. I was emotionally invested by that game so heavily. And I was, again, with Golden State and Cleveland in basketball, too. So I don't even know which one was better. But it's one of my favorite baseball games of all time. No question about it.
And it was great for the sport. It was great for baseball as far as recognition is concerned, and I guess bringing some ratings and popularity back to the sport. So hopefully this is a transition that bodes well for this year for Major League Baseball, because after that Game 7, all everyone was talking about baseball. That's all they were talking about. So that was something good and refreshing to see people talking about baseball for once. I remember that for that whole week, the headline was pretty much baseball, on Fox, ESPN, everywhere. And you hadn't seen that much coverage in baseball for years. And because of the Cubs winning, that was so huge because it was 108 years. It was exciting. They're one of the biggest marquee franchises in all of sports because of their market and it being in Chicago and whatnot. So they just had so much coverage on them that entire week, and that was really some good publicity there for baseball. So hopefully it's like a transformation of change coming for them this upcoming season. I think we're like 3 months away from opening day and whatnot. But yeah, so that was a fun Game 7 and a fun series for the Chicago Cubs. Good for them. Good for the city in Chicago. You know, they deserved it after so many years of waiting. And they're by far one of the best fan bases in all of sports as well. You know, just so loyal, so patient, so passionate. You know, hats off to them for waiting that long. Anyway, now we're about to dive into some of the final topics here, and I know we had a lot listed, but you know we got to fast forward with the programming because we have a lot of stuff left to cover here. So let's get down to a few more topics in the year review for 2016. I think we'll cover probably like 2 more. This one is definitely important to talk about here, and it's basically a year of retirements. The year 2016 was not just known for the Cubs, the Cavs, and the Broncos winning championships, but it was also the year of retirements. You had an era of sport coming to an end with guys like Peyton Manning and Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, David Ortiz, even Alex Rodriguez and Michael Phelps, and you had Vin Scully, the best broadcaster of all time, all retiring in the same year. I mean, that is insane. That level of talent, of performers, all retiring in the same year, 2016. Alex Rodriguez, of course, was my favorite growing up. Me being a Yankee fan and whatnot, I was able to watch many years of Alex Rodriguez in his prime. And for football, my favorite had to be Peyton Manning. And then you talk about basketball, Kobe Bryant was my favorite as well. So you're already talking about 3 of my all-time favorite athletes growing up. Kobe Bryant for basketball, Peyton Manning for football, and then Alex Rodriguez for baseball. All 3 of these legends that I grew up to love and watch and became the reasons why I even watched those particular sports. They all left in the same year. They all retired in the same year. They were responsible for me growing up to love the sport so much, to love the industry that is sports. Because of them, because of Peyton Manning, because of Kobe Bryant, because of A-Rod. At least for me, that's why I became such a huge fan of sports, because they were just so famous and so popular and so talented. And watching them was absolutely fun because not only were they great, but they were also fun and entertaining. You know, they were polarizing. Kobe Bryant, of course, with the attitude and the leadership he had and the anger if he never won the big one. Peyton Manning, whether or not he was going to choke in the playoffs or if he was going to succeed in the playoffs, that was always compelling. Alex Rodriguez, it was much of the same thing as Peyton Manning, you know, whether he was going to be a choke artist or was he going to deliver under the clutch. A-Rod was controversial as well. Kobe was controversial. I mean, these are 3 athletes here who really, really influenced me. And like I just said, they were my top 3 favorites growing up as a sports fan. Nowadays, I don't have a favorite. But back then when I was a kid growing up, oh man, those 3 were by far the top 3 on my list. Tim Duncan, I have to respect the man. You know, he did a lot for the sport of basketball, so I can't say anything bad about him. Kevin Garnett, the way I describe him,
amazing.
He was a mastermind at being a dirty player and getting into your head. So I guess in a way I can respect that because that's old school basketball mentality there. As far as David Ortiz is concerned, I gotta appreciate him for being a rival. I don't have much negative to say about him other than one little bit here about, you know, the whole steroid talk, that if we're going to classify A-Rod for being a cheater, then I think we have to put David Ortiz in that category. But other than that, to me, these are all great athletes. And after 2016, I don't think the world of sports will ever be the same as it once was.
No, it really won't. I mean, there's some amazing names on that list. And, I mean, again, legends, Hall of Famers, no question. I mean, maybe not the baseball guys with the steroid issues, but you know, I mean, I think Ortiz absolutely is a Hall of Famer. The thing is, for me, like with the steroid thing, I don't disagree. If they are both on a list and whatever, then they probably both should be lumped into a similar category. But I mean, A-Rod's like, it's admitted, it's out there, it's known. And I just feel like there's not a whole lot of solid concrete on anything that Ortiz ever did. It's just a lot of rumors as to, like he might have possibly could have potentially done this, whereas A-Rod, it's known that he did it, and 2 different times him getting into more and more trouble. But again, I still think A-Rod is a naturally gifted guy. Again, like we talked about on a previous show, people who took steroids are still talented players because, I mean, being able to hit a ball with that precision is still a natural gift that you have. You know what I mean? Like, steroids can't make you hit a ball. You know what I mean? It might make you hit a ball further, but it doesn't make you hit a ball. You know what I mean? The ability to have great contact on a baseball bat is a natural given gift that you have attained and earned and worked hard for. And people are very simple when they say, steroid means all of that doesn't matter. Yeah, well, actually it does, because those players still work their asses off to get to where they did. And A-Rod was an amazing player, who honestly deserves a lot of credit for what he was able to accomplish in his career. And by the way, I think his analyzing during the playoffs World Series, it was welcoming. It was nice. I enjoyed hearing A-Rod in that light. It gave me a better perspective of him, because I honestly, as a Red Sox fan, I could rip that guy into shreds. I can't stand him, But as somebody, but that's just the rivalry, That's the Red Sox Yankees rivalry. That's all it is, and that's how you probably would feel about David Ortiz. And in the clutch element of a game, when one of those guys comes to the plate, screw them, right? I mean, it might be a little more of a bad word that you would use instead of screw them, but it's true. You don't like the rival players. But I thought it was good to see A-Rod in that light, and I thought David Ortiz's retirement tour this year was really nice. I mean, he kind of regretted doing it because it was like everything became more about him than it was about the Red Sox winning a World Series, which is all he really wanted. But the numbers David Ortiz put up in his last season can't be undermined. He was 40 years old and had 35 home runs, 120 ribbies. He hit 320. That is unbelievable. That's almost like Tom Brady, you know what I mean? Like that big numbers in the end of your career. I mean, Ortiz could easily go up, suit it up this year and still have another good year. I would almost bank on it. But he decided what's better for himself. He has, he has especially leg issues. Achilles issues, that are plaguing him. It hurts. It hurts to go out there and play. And I know he's just a DH, but still running the bases, even if he's as slow as anything, he's still running. You know what I mean? And it's still a lot on you. And he's in his 40s now, and he decided what was best for himself. And I respect that so much, because he goes out on top. He goes out as a superstar, So even if he did ever do steroids, he proved that he's an amazing player by finishing his career with the best 40-year-old season. A season that someone has had at the age of 40 or above ever, in my opinion. I don't think anybody's ever put up those kind of numbers. I mean, he absolutely was in MVP candidacies, no question. I think the only thing that ever holds him back from MVP candidacy is the fact that he doesn't play in the field. But I hope that doesn't hold him back from a Hall of Fame nod, because the man is absolutely the best designated hitter of all time, and unquestionably is the epitome of the Red Sox, 3-time World Series champion, and an amazing, amazing run that I can never forget. But I do want to touch on Duncan and Garnett for a second. I mean, Tim Duncan is, to me, the definition of what a basketball player should be. He carried himself so respectfully. And the big fundamental, man. He played the game the way it's supposed to be played. One of the greatest power forwards of all time. And speaking of great power forwards, you got Kevin Garnett, who, again, I might have a little bit of a slighting bias toward, because of the fact that I watched him play in Boston, and he was Defensive Player of the Year in 2008, the year we won the championship. And without him, no way does a title come to Boston. He was, in my opinion, the most important aspect of that championship team. Even though Pierce was the scorer, Garnett was the all-around guy. And Ray Allen was the long distance assassin. I guess actually we can add Ray Allen to the list of retirees this year as well, because even though he hasn't played in a couple of years, he announced his retirement during 2016. So Ray Allen, another amazing player, best three-point shooter ever. I'm still going to say he's the best three-point shooter ever, even though Steph Curry very well may surpass him. He still has to do it before I'll say he is. Outside of him and Reggie Miller, I'd say Steph Curry probably already is the third best of all time. But Ray Allen, man, what a player he was too. A great, especially that moment he had with Miami, that clutch 3 hit against Tim Duncan's Spurs. That was probably the best moment of his career, and it came at the very end of it. pretty interesting. But Kevin Garnett, amazing trash talker, amazing player, so much heart and passion that he put into the game. You could feel the heart and passion he played with every day in and out. And Tim Duncan, like I said, the true fundamental, a 5-time champion and an absolute Hall of Fame guy. We go back to Kobe Bryant, one of the greatest players of this generation and any other. Again, 5-time champion, amazing stuff. One of the greatest pure scorers I've ever seen play. And that final game, holy crap! We gotta say, 60 points in the last game you ever play? It's like, again, like David Ortiz. He has that last season with like the amazing stats. Kobe Bryant might not have had the amazing stats that year, but how much better can you go out on than putting up 60 and winning a game that your team was losing by like 15 or 20 and hitting a game-winning shot?
And the best part about that game was it didn't come easy for Kobe Bryant because they really defended him well in that last game. Like, there was not a shot that was given to him, and in fact, he also missed a lot of his shots because if you remember that game, it's not like every shot that he was making was going in. He wasn't perfect, He took a lot of shots and he missed majority of them, but he was still able to reach 60. So he earned those 60 points. Like, he had to fight for them. But yeah, Kobe Bryant, again, for me, that's my guy. Like, you say you have a bias for for Kevin Garnett because he played for the Boston Celtics. But for me, growing up, I just used to watch the Lakers all the time, and Kobe Bryant was it for me. Like, he was the guy that got me into basketball, just his attitude, his presence, the way he carried himself, like just wanting to be a winner all the time and wanting to be a perfectionist. Oh, yeah. I think that's the attitude that you should have. Same thing with Tim Duncan. Even though Tim Duncan, you could argue he probably wasn't as mean or as vicious as Kevin Garnett or Kobe Bryant were, but he still played the game the right way. As you said, he was respected.
Yes.
He never tried to cheat or do anything dirty, but Tim Duncan was smooth, fundamental. He played the game the right way, and that's all you can ask for. He was a great teammate. And then I have something to say about Alex Rodriguez, though, because like, David Ortiz was able to get his retirement tour, but man, I'm a Yankee fan and all, but man, I felt like I had to go against the Yankees in August when they announced the way they were going to release Alex Rodriguez, because I still hold grudge over that, but I personally felt Alex Rodriguez should have been allowed the opportunity to finish the 2016 season with the Yankees, much like Ortiz was able to, and he should have just closed out the season in New York. But the Yankees were so desperate to get rid of him so they could go ahead with this new youth transition into next year, and they wanted to start using some of their guys from the minor leagues because, they want to see what they're all about. And I understand that, but man, Alex Rodriguez was such a crucial piece for the Yankees organization, and I just personally felt like he had more in him. But the problem was Brian Cashman and, the way the Yankees management were with Alex Rodriguez, they personally felt like he had nothing left. That's how it came off to me. I personally think the Yankees gave up on A-Rod. They lost confidence in him, so they benched him. But the reason for benching him, they said, was because he didn't have anything left. I think he did. But if you start benching him, how do you expect the guy to have any kind of momentum or to start playing at a level where you like him to play if he's on the bench all the time? Like, the rust is going to eventually get to him, and I think that's what happened with Alex Rodriguez. I don't think that he was aging or that he couldn't do anything anymore. I just think that once they started benching him, he started losing his rhythm, his flow, his consistency, and that's what benching does to you. And I think that, I don't know if that was intentionally done so that Alex Rodriguez could, I guess, call it a career or whatnot. I don't know, but to me, that whole thing there in the summer was kind of risky, and it was a big question mark for me because, I already said it earlier, I was a huge Alex Rodriguez fan. He's the reason I watched baseball more often than not. I was really upset with the way things ended for him here with New York. But I personally do feel like he's retired now, and if there's ever a team that he wants to play for if he came out of retirement, it would be the Yankees. I don't see him putting on another uniform. Now, of course, at that time, I thought he would put on another uniform and go to another team because I didn't think it was an Alex Rodriguez decision. I thought he would play for Miami or, even for your Boston Red Sox, ironically enough, the following season. But,
well, the funny thing is when he did sign with the Yankees, there was actually a debate whether he was going to sign with New York or Boston. I remember that.
Yeah, so, and that's why I said ironically, because I felt like, what a way for A-Rod to stick it to the Yankees if he were to go ahead and sign with the rivals, the Boston Red Sox, the following year. And, it's still possible, but I don't see it happening. Alex Rodriguez, he's had a few months removed from that now, and I think he's cleared his mind. We saw him in the Fox 5 coverage of the World Series and the postseason. He looked pretty, excited. He looked like he was relaxed and enjoying his life. So I think
he has a future as a broadcaster and being in that role. I think he does a good job with it. I really liked it. I liked actually that whole panel because you had him and Frank Thomas and Pete Rose, and who should be a fucking Hall of Famer. But anyway, but honestly, it was interesting to see him as a broadcaster. And if this is the end of his career, then it was a weird send-off, no question, because Derek Jeter got an amazing send-off, whereas A-Rod did not get an amazing send-off at all. I think it was very opposite. But, again, you have to consider Derek Jeter reminds you of kind of like a Tim Duncan. He's like that respected guy who played the game the right way. As a Red Sox fan, as a fan of the rival team, I love Derek Jeter. I don't care. I'll admit that. Derek Jeter is amazing. He's one of the best players of this generation. Not only do I respect him, but I truly enjoy him as a player. Like, I always thought he was fun to watch. It was a joy to play against him all the time. It was a joy. Even though he was always a threat to come up and get a base hit or a double or make an amazing defensive play or steal a base at any time. Even though he was kind of like a triple threat, I mean, man, was he a joy to play against. What a player. Derek Jeter was amazing. Whereas, you don't get that real impression with A-Rod, especially once the steroid things happen. Then everyone's like, the thoughts on him were very different. So I think the send-offs, I'm not saying it was fair to send him off like that, but I think that's kind of why it happened. He kind of lost a lot of people's respect, and I think that includes the Yankee management. I don't think they really looked at him in the same light they did when they signed him back in 2004, So definitely a shame to see him go in that way. But he had himself a hell of a career either way. Whether we talk about steroids or not, the numbers are great for A-Rod. And he's a naturally gifted player, in my opinion. So, but if he has a future as a broadcaster, I think that's pretty damn cool too.
Yeah, and as far as Peyton Manning, he probably had the best send-off yet. I mean, he retired.
Oh, yeah.
Even though with Peyton Manning it wasn't a farewell tour because he didn't decide to retire until after the Super Bowl. But still, what a way to go out. I mean, people were already expecting it for it to be his last season anyway. So I guess you could say it was kind of like a farewell tour for Peyton Manning, just an unofficial one. But yeah, Peyton Manning, oh man, if I have to thank one of these three the most, I think it has to be Peyton Manning because he revolutionized football. He made the sport what it is today as far as being prime time and it being so big and popular. I mean, think about it, not just as a quarterback or as a representative for the National Football League, but with all the commercials that he's doing with Papa John's and, being a comedian and all of that. Peyton Manning really, really helped benefit the league, the NFL, and for that I have to thank him as well because it wasn't just because of the numbers and how talented and gifted he was, but it was also what he did off the field, being a great person, being a great leader, a great spirited guy, and then the whole commercials and whatnot. I mean, Peyton Manning did it all. So he really revolutionized the sport of football. As far as Kobe Bryant, he revolutionized basketball, I guess, as well as Michael Jordan did. But I think Peyton Manning had more of an influence than Kobe just because of the fact that for basketball, it was kind of already always there. You know what I'm trying to say? Like with football.
Jordan was like generational, whereas Kobe kind of like picked up that slack, but he's not I think LeBron James is more generational than Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's kind of the in-between. And it's not to take away from the greatness of Kobe.
Right.
But I think Kobe's the kind of the in-between guy between Jordan and LeBron. Whereas LeBron is kind of like defining the next generation of basketball, or Steph Curry or, guys like that. And Peyton Manning, along with like Tom Brady and Drew Brees and guys like that, define the era of the passing quarterback, the long distance passing, the ability to hit your target so consistently. It really has changed the era of football from more of a running based game to a passing based game. It really has.
Yeah.
Guys like Manning, Brady, Breeze, etc., and Manning absolutely at the helm of that. One of the top level quarterbacks, no question. One of the most reliable regular season, maybe the best reliable and most reliable regular season QB of all time. Again, like I said, regular season QB, because we talked about the playoffs with him, and he had his ups and downs. But unquestionably, that doesn't negate the legacy of Peyton Manning, which is humongous. So his retirement on a really cool note. I got to say, winning a Super Bowl and then retiring, pretty damn cool feeling. Pretty damn cool. And he got to win a Super Bowl with 2 different franchises, too, which is pretty cool as well. I always have felt that. I mean, I think as a player, I would rather stick with the same franchise and win multiple times. But I think it would also, it cements your legacy that much more if you win with 2 different franchises. Because, I mean, I will always associate Peyton Manning more with Indianapolis than I will with Denver. I think everyone will. But to win a title with both is pretty amazing.
Yeah. So there you have it. Those were some of the retirements that we definitely wanted to cover and talk about and felt the most passionate for, with Peyton Manning, Alex Rodriguez, David Ortiz, Kobe Bryant, and etc. So to me, 2016 was also a pretty sad year and a crazy year. Of course, you could say that for many things, but also for sports. 2016 was just an overall chaotic year for everything going on in life, but definitely also for sports, because as exciting as some moments were, you also had very sad and down moments that you think will never happen again, or that you think really are going to affect the future for sport. And I think it definitely will affect the future for sport, with names like Peyton Manning and A-Rod and Kobe Bryant missing out now. But anyway, we have to get into the NFL MVP debate and a whole bunch of other discussions. So we're going to try and make this quick now. Some other honorable mentions for 2016 year in review that maybe we can touch on another day. Of course, Michael Phelps being an Olympic god, the loss of Muhammad Ali, rest in peace. You also have, for WWE, AJ Styles, who made his mark on WWE. He became the biggest non-WWE guy who won the world title and beat John Cena all in the same year within a very short time span. I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot more to say about that on a later day. So definitely remind me, Evan, because I'm not going to forget these topics. Also, Shane McMahon's return to WWE was huge in the year 2016. CM Punk losing to his opponent at UFC 203 in Gaul, that was big as well, because that was a fight that was anticipated for many, many months. And actually, for almost 2 years, we were waiting for CM Punk to be in the octagon. So I definitely want to talk about that. But since we're running out of time, we're going to transition now to stuff that's going on currently in the world of sport in 2017. The NFL season just finished this past Sunday, or at least the regular season did, and it wrapped up. So we are going to get an MVP winner very shortly, as it's always announced right after the regular season comes to an end. I think actually it always is announced by the end of January. So later this month, we might reveal or know who the MVP is. But for now, we can only speculate and assume and debate. For me, Evan, you want to know who my choice for MVP is for the NFL so far? For this year, it's got to be Aaron Rodgers. I know you were probably going to think that I was going to say Tom Brady, and that's probably going to be your pick. But for me, man, Aaron Rodgers was just absolutely amazing down the stretch. Started off the season, with a lot of question marks and people counting him out and doubting him and thinking that, he was already past his prime or whatnot. But man, in that second half, did he shut people up, prove everyone wrong, and he ultimately came back, carried his team, the Green Bay Packers, into the playoffs, not just as a wild card, but they actually win the division in the NFC North. And he came up big time, just dominated down the stretch. And look at the statistics here for you for a second. 40 touchdowns to 7 interceptions on the season. That's 40 touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers. How can you not look at this guy and think he's your MVP?
Yeah, definitely a good choice. And if I had to narrow down my final four, it would be 3 quarterbacks and then the 1 running back. So my 3 quarterbacks that I have down to are Tom Brady, yes, Aaron Rodgers, yes, and also Matt Ryan, because I think Matt Ryan and the Falcons are not getting the credit that they deserve, in my opinion. And then Ezekiel Elliott would be my 1 running back choice, although I do think that he has more of a case for Rookie of the Year rather than MVP. Even though I do think that, because he's, again, the leading rusher in the NFL this year, I do think that he has a case for MVP, but I don't think that he's going to win it. So I will kind of quickly eliminate him, but I will still say that I think there's an outside chance for him. But my 3 real choices would be Rodgers, Ryan, and Brady. And honestly, I think Matt Ryan actually is really deserving of this MVP. His overall QB rating, 117.1. I can't believe I'm saying that. He also had 38 touchdowns. I know Rodgers had 40, but also just 7 interceptions. And he had 4,900 yards, just shy of 5,000. The only person who had more yards than him this year was Drew Brees. And that's because Drew Brees is the only guy on that team. Although I still think that Drew Brees is a top 5 QB in the league. I might be in the minority there, but that man is still an amazing quarterback, especially given his age and what he can still do at that age. Aaron Rodgers' second half, though, was unbelievable, as you mentioned. Again, 4,400 yards on the season, a 104 rating for him, 40 touchdowns to just 7 interceptions. And then you have Tom Brady, who sets a record, an NFL record, 28 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, and only played 12 out of the 16 games this year. So obviously his yardage, obviously his touchdown numbers aren't going to be as high. But his rating, I believe, was finished at like 112 or 113. But 28 touchdowns to 2 interceptions is unbelievable. And you also have to consider that we have a great running game here in New England. Garrett Blount ended up with 18 rushing touchdowns on the season himself. So you have to figure that some of those touchdowns that Brady could have had for passing ended up just being a running TD that we were already in the red zone for. But nonetheless, number of touchdowns isn't the real reason why I would pick the MVP anyway. The reason I would pick the real MVP anyway is based on what an MVP should be, which is a guy who has the most impact on his team. And honestly, I really think that Tom Brady is deserving of it because of the fact that he did get suspended the 4 games. A lot of people are saying that's why it will hurt his case. If anything, to me, it should help his case because he missed 4 games, still came back and threw 28 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions on the year. And we ended up with the best record in the entire NFL with a 14-2 finish. However, I do think Matt Ryan is my second choice here because of the fact that he is so important to the Falcons. The Falcons would not be the number 2 seed, would not have a bye week if it wasn't for Matt Ryan's amazing play all season long. The guy was absolutely spectacular, nearly completed 70% of his passes, which is unbelievable in my personal opinion. His TD percentage, 7.1%, the highest of his career. An amazing mark. And that's even higher than Aaron Rodgers' percentage, too. It's higher than Brady's as well. So I just, honestly, I like to be like kind of contrarian. I just don't want to seem like I'm such a Patriots mark that I have to pick Tom Brady. I think I will kind of go with Matt Ryan. Like, I really think that he deserves this. Like, I mean, this is a guy who people never really give enough credit to, in my opinion. And more importantly than that, they don't really write him in as a top 5 level quarterback. And this year, in 2016 at least, you can't not say Matt Ryan was a top 5 quarterback this year. Arguably, he was number 1 in the league. If not, number 2 or 3. No question about it. But I do think Tom Brady makes an unbelievable case, considering he missed 4 games on the season, comes back, and then, only loses 1 game, leads the team to a 14-2 record. But I do think that his case does get hurt by the 4 games at the same time because the Patriots didn't struggle without him. We went 3-1 without Tom Brady, which is amazing. So it shows you that the Patriots are a deep team with a lot going for them. I don't think the Falcons are at anywhere near to that level. I think Matt Ryan fuels that offense, just like Aaron Rodgers fuels the Green Bay Packers. But I don't think I think we have to keep in mind that Rodgers' first half, even though as good as his second half was, which it was amazing, that first half wasn't as good. For me, that's what gives Matt Ryan the edge over him. So I guess to make sure that I don't seem like a biased Patriots fan, I guess I'll go ahead with Matt Ryan.
but I think the thing for me, though, is you said it earlier, like who had the most impact and the most influence on a football team? It's got to be Aaron Rodgers, man. I just genuinely believe that if it wasn't for Aaron Rodgers being on the Green Bay Packers team, the Packers wouldn't even be anywhere near playoff talk right now. Like, you take out Aaron Rodgers from any football team, and I think they're that much worse without him. Whereas, I don't know, man. I feel like if you take out Matt Ryan from the Atlanta Falcons, now granted they won't be that good, but I still think you can replace a Matt Ryan kind of quarterback for the Falcons. With the Green Bay Packers here, they're doomed without Aaron Rodgers. I really do think that they're doomed, that he's the reason why they're in the playoffs right now. He had ultimately the best second half from any other player in the NFL, whether that's a quarterback or just any other player. He played lights out football, and he got hot at the right time. He got his team hot at the right time. So with Aaron Rodgers, he's my MVP, because if I judge it based on importance and value, that man right there is the most important player for the Green Bay Packers. And he was clutch. That's another argument you can make for him. He was clutch. He delivered. He didn't upset anybody. He didn't turn the ball over. He just played absolutely lights out. I think the case with Matt Ryan, the difference is they have such a great high-octane offense team that you would expect that from the Atlanta Falcons, especially also when you have a wide receiver such as Julio Jones on your team and such a great offensive line. Aaron Rodgers had barely anything to work with. You saw the injuries that happened both defensively and offensively for the Packers. You know, they had no running game. They barely have a secondary. I mean, their secondary is completely decimated right now. And, you know, we're going to talk about the playoffs a little bit later on, you know, in the upcoming days with the Giants. But I expect the Giants and Eli Manning to just tear that secondary apart. But yeah, so Aaron Rodgers barely had anything to work with, and yet because of him, he's able to rally his team into the playoffs. How can you not use that as the main argument here that solidifies him as the MVP? I would make a great argument for Tom Brady as well, but I got to disagree on Matt Ryan. I think if we're looking at the top two realistic MVP candidates here, I think Aaron Rodgers is number one, Tom Brady is number two. I don't think Matt Ryan is close or will be close to winning it at all. I just don't see it happening.
No, I'm not necessarily saying that's who I think will win. That's just who I think should win.
Yeah.
And the reason why is mainly because of the fact that, I mean, the guy put up over 300 yards a game, and that's, well, damn near impossible to do. And, you know, even despite the fact that maybe Rodgers had maybe a little bit less to work with, I still think Matt Ryan is the reason why the Falcons are where they are. And they don't get talked about ever. Like, no one talks about the Falcons and how good of a year they had. They're the second seed in the NFC, and they've earned themselves a bye week. And that's not – I don't think anybody came into this year expecting the Falcons to be a team that could ever have gotten a bye week. I mean, maybe a playoff appearance, but definitely not second best in the conference. And I just –
didn't they get a bye week? I think it was in the 2012-13 season. Like, remember that season where they almost went undefeated as well? I think that's the only other season they had a bye week.
Right. So, and I mean, in last year, this team didn't even make it to the postseason. So, I mean, you have a team right now, or if they did it, they were a wild card team. I'm pretty sure last year they didn't make it. Most of the time, they're a team that's in or around the playoffs, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think Matt Ryan, his impact on this team is not talked about enough. I really think that this is a guy who doesn't get the credit he really does deserve. And yeah, you know, he does have somebody like a Julio Jones, but every main quarterback has a couple of targets that are pretty damn reliable. And I know Julio is one of the best, but again, that connection isn't just on Julio. It's not just on Matt Ryan. That's just a great connection that these two guys happen to have, an amazing receiver to an amazing QB. I don't know. I just think Matt Ryan is one of those guys who never gets the credit he quite deserves. Again, over 300 yards a game, 7.1% for touchdowns, which is unfreaking believable. Only 7 interceptions, plus 38 touchdown passes with nearly 5,000 yards. More yards than Rodgers, higher rating than Rodgers, higher touchdown percentage than Rodgers, higher yards per game than Rodgers. And again, I don't want to just be a stats guy and a higher passing completion percentage as well. I don't want to just be a stats guy here, but I really do believe that the Falcons, like when it comes to the numbers, when it comes to the abilities to put those numbers up week in and week out, Matt Ryan had a better year beginning to end. So that to me also goes into the MVP argument. And I don't think it's just about how good your last 7 or 8 games were. I think it is about how good your 16 games were. And I really think Matt Ryan had himself the best season of his career and of his life. And again, and you look at Tom Brady, this man is 39 years old. I think that's another reason why Tom Brady makes such a good case for MVP. But I don't want to, I'm not trying to discount, double check Aaron Rodgers here, because I think Aaron Rodgers is a great QB and he's one of the best in the leagues. And in fact, he's one of my favorites to watch. So I always think he's an MVP candidate. And I'll be honest with you, any of these 3 guys winning the MVP, I'm 100% fine with it. Any of them. Any 3 of them. I'm not going to be disappointed if Aaron Rodgers wins. He's absolutely a guy who's deserving of it. He makes a great case. He had an amazing second half to the season, and the clutch factor of him is ridiculous. When it comes to game-winning drives, Aaron Rodgers is probably the most reliable QB in the league. I'd put him and Tom Brady at the top of the league when it comes to being reliable on a game-winning drive. The game's on the line. I wouldn't trust Matt Ryan like I would trust Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, but that's not the MVP argument. That's just the greatness of a QB argument. You know what I mean? But Tom Brady at 39 years old to do what he did this year is like unbelievable. He's actually getting better stats wise each year. It's like the last few years since he's turned 36 and up, literally his stats are getting better. Tom Brady is like Benjamin Button or something. Like this guy just does not age. He doesn't get older. It's like he gets better with age, and that's an amazing stat. And again, I'm going to sound biased with that because I'm a Patriots fan, but I mean, I'm not being biased when I say that. That's just a football fan just being honest and saying Tom Brady is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. There's no question about it. And Aaron Rodgers is making his case as one of the best modern QBs who will, by the time his career is over, most likely be in that same conversation. Matt Ryan probably will not be in that conversation. However, he will always go down as a guy who is a solid and reliable QB, who I think this year had an especially good season. And that's why I think he should be the MVP, because he stood out to me the most of anybody over the course of September through December. But that's just me.
It's going to be interesting, but I think you said it perfectly earlier, which is my reason for why I think Matt Ryan won't win it and he shouldn't win it, is that he hasn't been as reliable as the other 2 quarterbacks have been known for in terms of Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, which I think, even though you think it won't, I think it will kind of affect the MVP chances of him winning, to be honest with you, because Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are so much powerful in their brand and in their name and recognition and exposure and legacy and all of that, that I think that'll ultimately give them a better chance of winning it than with Matt Ryan. Also with Aaron Rodgers, he did play through injury. He had a bit of a ankle issue in the last few games of the season that he had to fight through, and he was still able to overcome all of that and play lights out. Again, the mobility factor in Aaron Rodgers, extending drives and extending plays. I mean, man, that guy can simply do it all. I think he's the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I'm not saying of all time. Definitely right now, like in terms of talent and what he's capable of doing and his accuracy, his ability, the long ball, he can do it all, Aaron Rodgers. And maybe I have a bit of a bias for him, but that's my MVP pick. I'd say with certainty that he's going to win it. And in fact, I'll be shocked if he doesn't, because you make a great argument about Tom Brady, but the thing about Tom Brady, I think anybody who misses 4 games, that should ultimately affect your chances. Also, the other thing with Tom Brady, he was already, I'm not taking away his greatness here, but you know what I'm going to say next. He's already on a great football team like the New England Patriots. Yes, yeah. You guys did lose Rob Gronkowski, but again, Aaron Rodgers had way more injuries for his team, and look what he was able to do. So it's going to be a fun debate for the next couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, and I mean, again, like I said, I can see any of them winning it. I mean, if I'm predicting who wins, um, hmm. I'd probably say I think Rodgers and Brady are the two finalists.
Yeah.
No question about it. I mean, again, like I said, even though I think Matt Ryan is very deserving of it, it doesn't mean that I think that he actually will win. Again, those are two different things to me because like you can predict all night long who you think will win. Well, I think so and so will win the Super Bowl, but I'd like to see this. Those are two. You know what I mean? Those are two different things. But yeah, so I think Matt Ryan would be a nice surprise and be a nice, different type of MVP. Because again, he's a guy who probably won't ever win another one. You know what I mean? Like this would be his one time to shine. So I think it would be nice. And I'm not saying that's a reason for why he should win. I'm just saying that it would be nice because he's not the kind of guy who normally is MVP candidacy each and every year. And I just think that what he was able to do for the Falcons this year is very impressive considering that they weren't really expected to be all that good. And to me, the Packers were expected to be a really good football team, and they were 4-6 through their first 10 games. Again, an amazing comeback to make it win the division and be a 4 seed in the conference. I'm not denying that comeback is a reason that helps fuel Aaron Rodgers, but you can't forget those first games. You can't forget how poorly that team was performing, and he wasn't performing all that well in the first few games either. And again, yes, he might have been bothered by some injury. But again, Russell Wilson was bothered by injury this year, and he's not even up for the MVP candidacy because he just had a really rough season. Even though that team is still very good, he's not even in the talk this year, which is interesting because usually he's the kind of guy who you would talk about. But like I said, those 4 choices that I laid out were the 4 that I see as having any chance at all. And I would say Rodgers and Brady are definitely the top 2. I wouldn't be surprised if Rodgers wins, especially because of the story of the last few weeks. And good on him if he does, because he's still a hell of a quarterback and definitely a top 5. Again, if I had a top 5 for this season, Brady, Ryan, and Rodgers are all in that top 5. Not a doubt about it. So, I mean, they're all deserving. And Ezekiel Elliott, one of the biggest impact players in the entire NFL this year, no question about it. And no doubt him or Dak should win Rookie of the Year. I don't care which one, but man, that either one of them could earn Rookie of the Year. And that's the reason why I think Ezekiel Elliott isn't a bad choice for MVP is just because, yeah, obviously he's a running back, and people usually look at this as more of a quarterback-centric type of award. But I like the idea of there being a running back as a possibility for a winner. And the reason why is because Ezekiel Elliott had such a big impact on that team. And honestly, I don't think Dallas is even close to where they are without his ability.
Oh, definitely.
So you know what I mean? So again, it comes down to the impact you have on your team. Rodgers, no question, without him, that Green Bay team probably finishes like 6-10, and without Tom Brady, the Patriots might still have finished pretty well. So I think that's one way to look at it. But I also think that without Matt Ryan, the Falcons aren't even in the playoffs. So again, just my opinion, but I really think Matt Ryan, is a great placement QB. He might not be on the level of Brady and Rodgers in terms of who you rely on, but this season, maybe, just maybe he is. It's kind of like what Carson Palmer did for Arizona last year. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable contribution that he had for that team.
Definitely. All right. Now we transition into WWE. We're going to have more NFL stuff to talk about later on in the week. We don't want to talk about the playoffs just yet. So, the topic of conversation throughout the entire weekend, of course, was Ronda Rousey after her big fight Friday night, December 30th. She lost to her opponent, Nunes, who just completely knocked her out in what was 48 seconds. And man, what an upset for Ronda Rousey. Everyone was hyping her up, looking forward to her big fight, her big return. I was excited. I was wanting her to win. I was behind her. I was supporting her fully so she can shut everyone up, prove all her haters wrong. And yet she disappoints, she upsets, and it seems like, at least with MMA and UFC, her career may be over in terms for that, because after the fight, everyone just completely got on her case, saying it looked like she was never into it, looks like she never wanted to be back, looked like her mind was somewhere else. And maybe that might have been the case. Maybe it had a whole mental effect on Ronda Rousey. Or it could have just been the fact that she tried to go at Nunes in a different way of fighting that she's not typically known for, which is going pound for pound in a boxing kind of style. And Ronda Rousey, if you remember, she's not known for that kind of style. She's known for submission and arm bars and really grappling her opponent down to the ground. And that's not what she tried to do here with Nunes. It seems like she tried to knock her out and go punch to punch with her. But whether it was mental or whether it was a false fighting style for Ronda Rousey, I know one thing's for sure. I don't think she was prepared. So
No.
whether it was mentally or just a different fighting style, either way, she was not prepared. And you could tell on her face. Like, yeah, she had this big confident presentation coming down when she made her entrance, but I think that was her just acting up her part and hyping her stock. But I think deep down she knew she was not prepared for this. Like, I genuinely believe that.
Yeah, she wasn't ready at all. And to get beaten 48 seconds makes her look terrible, and it hurts her credibility, and it hurts, to me, it hurts the drawing power for her to be in WWE. I really do think so. I'm not saying WWE shouldn't go after her now. I'm just saying that I think that the stock has dropped with Ronda Rousey now that she's lost twice in a row. Really not a good look for her. And I actually feel for her in that way. But I don't think she picked herself up the way she needed to after her first loss. She probably should have come out of that first loss with the gung-ho attitude of, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be better than ever. She probably took a little too much time off because then she let it all get into her head. And then, again, if she presents herself with a different fighting style, it doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense why she would do that against an opponent, like Nunes. Not a good idea. Terrible stuff on her part. And, again, I think she's gotten a rude awakening, I think, from what happened the first time. And now I think she's definitely afraid for her own future because, like, what do you do now? What's next for Ronda Rousey? I don't know what's next for Ronda Rousey.
No one's going to want to market her anymore or advertise her or run her up to be on a big hit of a movie that's coming out. I don't see that happening for her now.
Yeah, it just seems like her career is now going to go in a different direction, or maybe not even in any direction at all when it comes to UFC anymore. But you know what? She's still a trailblazer for women's, mixed martial arts, absolutely. And she's still a big name that did a lot for the sport over the last couple of years. It's just really strange for her to kind of fall out of favor so quickly. But it goes to show you how temporary things like that can be. Like we talk about Conor McGregor and how dominant he is and all this other stuff. And what if he loses a couple of times in a row? Now what? And I mean, it's not like she just got beat. She got freaking destroyed. I mean, she got beaten 48 seconds. It's not like Ronda lasted the entire fight and by unanimous decision she lost. Like, oh, that's one thing. But, I mean, she got beaten 48 seconds. Done. Goodbye. Sayonara. See you later. That's a problem. So I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future with her. I still think there's a possibility of her in WWE, and I still think it'd be cool if she comes to WWE. But I do think the stock has definitely dropped. I'm sure you can see what I mean there. I mean, the stock drops on somebody when they lose twice in a row. It's just the nature of the beast.
Do you think? Here's something interesting that I don't think anybody has proposed yet. But do you think her own fame ultimately became her biggest destroyer and enemy? Because the way I look at it is, she was dominant for a long period of her time in UFC. But I think because of that, everyone wanted Ronda Rousey on the next big magazine, on the cover of a magazine, or on their next big show or a Hollywood movie. And I think because of that, it took away from her being in the octagon in terms of getting her focus back to what she truly loved doing, to what was her career, her passion. And I think that her going off to do movies and be on TV, I think that ultimately affected her. So it could be a thing where her own greatness, she was just not able to handle that. And I think that's kind of what, I guess, transitioned to her downfall. Because I don't think if she was that great, I don't think she gets distracted. To be honest, I don't think she looks at herself and classifies herself as being above everybody else, because that's the kind of attitude she had, when she started doing these movies. So I think that if she had stayed away from Hollywood, if maybe she didn't get as much praise as she was receiving, if the pressure wasn't so much on her, and if UFC didn't bank on her so much, maybe, just maybe, she'd still be fighting on a consistent basis for UFC. But after that one loss, it's like she never knew what to do with herself from that. And I think that's ultimately what affected her in terms of branding and whatnot. So maybe if she had a couple of losses earlier on in her career, she'd be more humbled and more relaxed about it, wouldn't take it so bad. But I think that for her, it was all or nothing. Once she got recognition with Hollywood and all these big TV markets, I think that's what really made her believe she's untouchable and that she's at a level nobody else can ever obtain. But I think that because of that, that's what affected her, now that I think about it.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point, and I actually think that might have a lot to do with it. I think, like we talked, you kind of posed that question a little earlier about, could it have been mental, and I think a lot of it is mental. I think she's a mental, she had a lot of mental, issues after her first loss, and I think it was very clear that was the issue, and that was in her head the rest of the way, and that might be something that ruins a career. It has before. Let's not pretend that nobody's career has ever been ruined by mental, episodes or constantly thinking about stuff. Like I can think of Clay Buchholz on the Red Sox, who we just actually traded not that long back, a couple of weeks back. He's a good example. He was always kind of a mental case. He always was thinking too much when he got onto the mound and started to pitch. He just thought too much about things, and I think that's what happened with Ronda Rousey here as well. Kind of just having issues with thinking too much. We've all done it. Again, I've played sports throughout my growing up years, and I'm a bowler, a big time bowler now, and when you're up there and you're trying to hit a baseball, dribble, shoot a basketball, bowl a strike, whatever it may be, you're thinking a lot about that, and when you're off, you're really thinking about it, and it throws you off when you overthink something. If you overthink something, you will perform poorly. It's happened to me. I know what it's like. So I really think that obviously it might be on a much smaller level, but the same principle applies. I feel like So absolutely, to me, a mental thing with Ronda Rousey, not completely, but definitely part of it.
And as far as WWE signing her is concerned, listen, I'm still the biggest Ronda Rousey fan. I don't care what anybody says. To the doubters that are thinking she's a complete failure now, who's never going to amount to anything else going forward for her career, I see WWE as a second career for her. I seriously do. I mean, I saw a tweet that really stood out to me the other day, or on that same night actually, when Ronda Rousey lost, that had mentioned, listen, Brock Lesnar lost his final fight in the Octagon as well that same day, December 30th. I believe it was 2011. And guess what? Everybody got on Brock Lesnar that week, and the entire media ripped Brock Lesnar. I remember it like it was yesterday. And, they were saying Brock Lesnar's done. He's never going to be the same again, this and that. And lo and behold, a few months later, Brock Lesnar comes back, signs with WWE, became the biggest, hottest name at that time, the biggest, hottest free agent on the market. Now, of course, Brock Lesnar was already known for being in WWE prior to that, so he had more stability in terms of recovering his image and all of that. But Ronda Rousey, even though she was never really employed by WWE, she did have an appearance last year at WrestleMania 31, or actually I should say 2 years ago now, and it really worked out in her favor because the fans loved her. And I think the fans would still mark out if they hear Ronda Rousey's music and she enters the ring. I don't care what anybody says. If WWE were to surprise all of us and catch us by surprise with Ronda Rousey coming out of nowhere down the ramp, you're going to tell me none of those fans in attendance that night are going to go crazy like, whoa, we didn't see this coming. Of course they are. Of course they are. And I think that Ronda Rousey, once she makes it to the WWE, she'd be legitimate because she'll have the advantage of saying over everybody else on the roster, listen, I was a real fighter. They'll still buy into the fact that she's a legitimate draw, a legitimate threat in that women's division, that she can actually kick some real ass,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I still think that yeah, people will go nuts. It would still be a good draw for WWE. So even though the stock might have dropped with her, I don't think it's something where you completely shut the door on this now. I mean, if anything, it's maybe this is the time to capitalize on it. So, maybe you capitalize on it. She does this for a while. She wins the women's title. I mean, it's a big deal. People, you will get more eyes on WWE's product if you have Ronda Rousey. No question about it. Even despite the losses, she still is a good drawing figure for WWE. So if they're able to sign her and she's interested, you got to go for it.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I want to see it happen. We're all begging for it to happen in the year 2017. And speaking of the year 2017, we started off talking about the year that was last year of 2016. We're going to close it out by giving our quick bold predictions for 2017. Now, I laid out a few predictions myself, Evan. I'm going to get straight to the point here. Here are a few predictions I have for 2017, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. Prediction number 1, Golden State Warriors will face the Cleveland Cavaliers, Part 3 of the NBA Finals in June. Prediction number 2, the Dominican Republic will win the World Baseball Classic that will begin in March. Prediction number 3, John Cena, this is for WWE now, John Cena will retire The Undertaker at WrestleMania and eventually turn heel either the night of or the following night on SmackDown or Raw or whatever. Prediction number 4, Russell Westbrook will become your NBA MVP by the end of the 2017 NBA season. And prediction number 5, I believe it is. No, I lost track. Tony Romo will sign with the New York Jets. Samoa Joe for WWE will become a world champion in the year 2017, and he will debut on the main roster. And final prediction, Evan isn't going to like this one, but I am. The New York Yankees will make the playoffs. Guarantee it.
Mm-hmm. And then my bold prediction is the Red Sox will beat them in the ALCS.
Okay, nice little counter there.
But yeah, no, those are some interesting predictions. I definitely agree on the Warriors and Cavs, and I'm going to go out on the limb and say that the Cavs do it again and they repeat. I think the Cubs and Red Sox play each other in the World Series. That'll be one of my bold ones. Man, I don't know. For WWE, any bold predictions that I have? John Cena, let's say John Cena at least ties Ric Flair's record finally. And maybe even breaks it in 2017 with WWE Championships at 1. I think that there's a good chance of that. Wow. Patriots win the 5th Super Bowl. Man, I don't know. I got to say, Russell Westbrook winning MVP, I absolutely believe that'll happen. I 100% think he's the MVP this year. But, yeah, I mean, those would be some of mine as well. WWE, one other thing. Braun Strowman is a main eventer by the end of the year. Or has fought for the WWE Championship at least one occasion, whether it's on Raw or on pay-per-view.
That's a bold one there.
He's main evented a show in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. That's just a bold prediction.
All right. That's an interesting one. And I don't think I had actually I did have a football one in there with Tony Romo going to the Jets. But I guess in terms of anything recent going on, I guess I forgot the final prediction for 2017. Giants versus Patriots, Part 3, Super Bowl 51 in a few weeks from now. Guarantee that's going to happen. There we go.
I'll tell you something. It'd be interesting for the third act of that one, no doubt.
And I think it'll be interesting for the name of this show, Rivals React. You and I will be going at it constantly the next few weeks if we find out that the Giants go on a run and the Patriots go on a run. So how convenient is it that we'll be around for that and we'll be able to talk about it with each other if it happens.
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so.
Yep. All right, guys. I know we kept you here listening for a while, in fact, over 2 hours, but we did have to come back with a bang. We were off for a whole week, so we figured why not deliver on the first show of the year with a big one. And that's exactly what we did, and it's actually going to get bigger because next week, January 10th, we're going to have For the Win, USA Today sports writer and former Sports Buzz reporter at NJ.com, Charles Curtis, as a guest for the program Rivals React. We will be asking him questions. He will be here for an interview. And also, we will have Dennis, who will be on the following day, Wednesday, January 11th. And we have some interesting questions to ask him as well. You can check out his podcast and his website at DennisHasAPodcast.com. He's a local New Yorker with a big story to tell. And he's a wrestling fan, much like me and Evan are as well. So he loves sports and wrestling. So I'm sure that's going to be fun. And all of that is coming next week. Show's going to get bigger. As for us, we are signing off.